Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. The world of ultra-distance running has introduced me to some of the most memorable and, of course, interesting people. My guest here is no exception. I've known of Laura for a few years from following her ultra event that she organizes, which is Survivorfest 24-hour race, to her making special trips out to St. Paul just to help out with our Iron Horse Ultra 100. She always seems to be the right person for the job that needs to be done. In fact, I think that is her job, right? Task guru, ultra event organizer, ultra runner, with an impressive consecutive day running streak. Wife, mother, am I missing anything?
It does sound pretty ultra impressive.
I'm overwhelmed but honored that Laura Sherrer-Townsend found enough time to squeeze in a podcast with me. Welcome. I'm looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this and sharing a little bit about yourself. This is my opportunity to actually get, because we go to these events and we hear about them, but there's not a lot of time to sit down and really get to know someone. It's like little bits and pieces here and there, which intrigues me and which has brought us to this point, right? So, but let's start. I guess I always like to start. I don't really know a lot about you other than what we've just kind of went over. So how about we start at the beginning? Where did you grow up?
So, I grew up in the eastern townships of Quebec on a farm. And so I think that might be why I love your podcast so much, is because the people that you're interviewing, I can relate to because I grew up in that small town farming community, and everybody has an interesting story.
Absolutely.
And their backgrounds are just, I find it just so interesting and cool to find out all those little bits and pieces of people that make them who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you always had that fascination or that interest with people's stories? Because you kind of latch, I mean, there's a lot of passion with the running community that you have in Share, and we've talked about this. You listen to a lot of running podcasts, but this is one of the only non-running podcasts. We've mentioned it a couple of times because of some of my other guests, but you've said that you kind of latched onto this one. And has it always been because you're interested in people like that?
I don't know what it is, Ben. Like,
Okay.
honestly, yeah, most of what I listen to is running podcasts, because the running podcasts I do listen to, a lot of them the athletes are talking about themselves and their stories and their backgrounds. But yours is special just because, like I said, I think it's the small community aspect to it, and just, I don't like, even the last one I listened to was of the coach.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's that Doug in every community.
There really is.
There really is.
Absolutely.
Like in the smaller communities, you really notice it more.
Yeah.
But like here, even so my family always is curious, how do you live? Because I live in Sherwood Park, which it's a hamlet, but we just reached 100,000 people.
Right.
And so that's not a small town farming community. It used to be a long time ago.
Right.
But my family is always questioning, Laura, how can you live in the suburbs or in the country? But I think it's because Sherwood Park still has that small town feel to it, where my kids are always joking with me, where everywhere I go, there's someone who knows me. And because I bring that small town farming community feel, where I say good morning to everyone.
Yeah.
Like I say hello, or I'll, see something that someone has or does, and I'll just, point it out and kind of give it to them, like as a compliment, like say, oh, I really like your sweater. And then all of a sudden it turns into a conversation. I think that's something that I picked up from my dad, because my dad was very much a people person and just made friends wherever he went. And I've been gifted that from him for sure.
Maybe that's the draw. What's had me to line you up, because we've been talking for quite a few months about trying to find a time to sit down for this. But I always have a saying: if you want to be interesting, be interested, and it has to do with, I guess, you put people first, and that draws people to you.
Oh, I never really thought of it that
Well,
way.
and I've always noticed
that like makes me feel really good. I'm like, I never really thought of it that way. I just thought of it as some quirky weird thing.
I've always had that thought run through my brain with pretty much every guest I've had on the show, and I think there's something about them, some way or another, that they're always focused on someone else, and it's right off the get-go. Well, this is a podcast about you, but now you turned it on me to talk about this. So let's go back to you here. So you grew up on a farm in Quebec. What kind of a farm was it?
So it was not the typical farms that are out here in Alberta. Actually, when my dad and I moved out to Alberta 20 years ago, we marveled at the size of the farms because it was more of the old style European type farming,
Right.
where we had a bit of dairy, a bit of beef. We grew our own crops for our animals. We had a couple horses because of me. At one point, we had some goats. We actually cut wood in the wintertime. And then our cousins had a maple sugar bush that
Right.
we would help out in the spring sometimes. And so it was very much like one farmer in our area had a combine. And they would come and cut for us, and then we would give them a portion, or we would pay them to do that for us.
Right.
So it was very different, very different.
Wow.
Yeah.
So growing up on the farm in Quebec, where does this, maybe it doesn't, but a big part of your life, like we mentioned here, the ultra distance running and communities, and there's a few things we're going to talk about that, but let's go how did you get into that type of thing? That's always a great story, I find, with all the people I talk to.
It is. And so funny enough, I did play sports in school. I played soccer, rugby, a little bit of volleyball, was never good at basketball. But the funny thing is, and this is actually a common story amongst a lot of runners, is I hated running. I hated the running part. When the coach would say, okay, we're going to do a few laps to get warmed up, inside I would just cringe, and I would think to myself, why? We're going to be running all through practice. Why do we have to do laps? And then I picked up running in my mid-20s to de-stress from a high-stress job. And also I found weight-wise, I wasn't really comfortable where I was. And so when you're looking to lose weight, they always say running is the fastest way to do it. Mm-hmm. So I joined a running room, and I got up to 10K, but I still didn't really love it. And then, funny thing is 18 years ago, found out that we were pregnant with triplets.
Oh, wow.
So that's a whole other story. But my husband and I, we were reading through some stuff, and we decided we would take one thing that was for ourselves, that was
right.
outside the family, outside of work. And funny enough, and I still don't know why I picked running. So the pregnancy was great, healthy pregnancy. I carried them to 33 and a half weeks. And then it was a huge struggle after they came, to keep up with the demands of 3 premature babies, because
right.
they were still a little tiny. And then in August, I decided I'm going to go back to the running room and take a clinic. And then one thing led to another. And this time around, I really met some really cool people. Mm-hmm. And maybe it was because I now was looking at running as a social part of my life, and also as a physical part of my life, whereas before it was more physical.
Yeah.
And so it ended up that I met people who were parents. And so sometimes, like during the runs, I'd show up and I'd be overwhelmed and I'd be tired. And most of them, would be very supportive and say, I remember that time too, and it'll pass. And so it gave me some hope and optimism. And then I would run. So it was like a 2-for-1. And then I met a lot of people who had these great goals, like long distance goals, like Ironmans and marathons. And hey, we'd meet for coffee after, and I think, wow, or I'd tell them and say, I can't believe you do that. And they'd say, oh, well, if I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
And that really ended up becoming a common theme. And so, I did the 5K, and then, well, that was pretty good. Let's see if we can get into a 10K, right? And that went pretty good. And then I got into a half marathon clinic, and that's where I met another mom. She had 5 kids. And at the time, I only had the triplets, and we were at the back of the pack just chatting about life, our families, and we would just keep taking these clinics and signing up for races, and one thing led to another, and before you knew it, I'm signing up for my first ultra.
So just to give anybody who doesn't understand or know what we're talking about when we say ultra distance, so ultra is anything that's more than a marathon. A lot of them start at around the 50K, and then it goes up from there. There's insane. A former Iron Horse ultra runner that's run a race a few times just finished the Moab 240, which is 240 miles in the Moab Desert, which I can't. And I think it was somewhere 120 hours for her to finish.
Was that Natalie?
Yes.
Yes.
So I mean,
I keep hoping she's going to come to Survivorfest. She's been wanting to.
But what was your first ultra? I guess would be. Let's start there.
Well, so it was Gord's Frozen Ass 50 down in Calgary. My friend Don Wheatcroft, who was my half marathon instructor, he was actually doing Ironmans and ultra marathons at the same time.
Right.
And he found that they were kind of complementary of one another. But he was like 17 years ago, he was a huge supporter of women as endurance athletes doing Ironmans and ultramarathon distances. And what is amazing is that women really in these ultramarathon distances are really showing that there really is no gender bias when it comes to it's pretty amazing, and it just makes me more of a fan. But oh my god, I can't even remember what you asked me.
Your first ultra.
My first ultra. And so yes, that's right. Sorry. And so Dawn had told me, for your first ultra, pick something that doesn't have a time cutoff, so that it's generous, because sometimes these ultra marathons, there's time cutoffs.
Yeah. And
they can make it a little more stressful, especially for the first timers. And so I went down and did it, and it was like minus 16, I think, that year. It was boring. Like, it was an out and back, flat, along the Bow River, out towards Chestermere. But the people were amazing. And there was bacon at the aid stations. There was bacon, there was chips, there was cookies, there was pop. And, but it was really the community. And so it was this out and back, 25K out to Chestermere and back. And so as I'm running out, the fast athletes are coming back, and every single one of them was like, good job, way to go. You're almost at the end, or, like there was always some encouragement. And, and so after that, I kept going back every year, because it had a special place in my heart, and it really helped motivate me to run through the winter.
Well, yeah. And I was going to say, that's been my, downfall in this thing is, you hit about, I keep running after the iron horse until the snow flies, and then I have issues with that. There's a lofty goal that you had mentioned to me prior to this of running 50 ultras before you're 50. How many ultras have you ran so far?
I've ran 42.
Wow. And so why did this goal become something in your...
So I came up with this goal about, it was 2017, and I had my last child, my little guy, Matt, and I went to the school, and because they were having an information session where the principal was there, the RCMP liaison was there, and also representatives of the Saffron, the sexual assault center here in Sherwood Park.
Okay.
And they were talking about some education programs that they were implementing in the schools about preventing sexual violence for our children.
Right.
And so it's all done very age appropriate. So like from grades 1 to 3, grades 4 to 6 are all taught different things. So like for grades 1 to 3, they talk about consent, boundaries, being a good friend. And then in grades 4 to 6, they talk a little bit more, like they kind of layer on top of that.
Okay.
Start talking a little bit more about relationships, boyfriends, girlfriends, and a little bit about social media. And then they talk about how they go into junior highs and then the high schools, and they layer on top of that. And it really resonated with me because I'm a sexual assault survivor. And I thought, man, what happened to me may not have happened if this was happening in my schools. And so then, I sat there amazed, and then I went out on a run, and all of a sudden, and there had been a Calgarian, Martin Parnell, who had ran 250 marathons in a year fundraising for Right to Play. And through being inspired by him and finding out about these programs, I was like, what can I do to raise awareness and funds for our sexual assault center here in Sherwood Park? And so I came up with this, maybe I'll run 50 ultra marathons before I'm 50.
Right.
And I just started spreading my message, and it's been fantastic. Like Saffron Center is so happy to have me on board, spreading that message of, yeah, this shitty thing happened to me when I was a kid,
Right.
but I can do something now.
Right.
Like, and actually on a lot of the runs, what pushes me forward are the same things that pushed me and helped me along as a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does that intertwine with the event you organize here in Sherwood Park called Survivorfest?
Absolutely.
Okay. In the world of ultra running, this is a unique one on its own. I mean, we love those non-repetitive courses. But is there an element of, surviving running on a track for 24 hours that ties in with it? Or was it just, why did you decide to do it that way?
Well, what happened was actually a friend of mine who also is a survivor approached me about bringing a running event to raise funds to Sherwood Park. But at the time, my little guy was only 2, so I had 5 kids under the age of 10. And I was a bit overwhelmed with work and volunteering, and I said, and kids, so I'm not really ready yet. And then a little while later, when I felt like I was a little bit less busy, I thought, what's going to happen once my mission to run 50 ultras is over? And I thought, if I start this race before that's over, this will be established enough that it can continue that message and the raising of funds for these education programs. And so there have been many times where I've thought, oh my God, what did I do to myself? I'm way too busy to be doing this. But I've had some great friends that have stepped up. And so now I have this great team that have really made it successful in the last few years that we've been established. But really, no, the going around the track was really more about what type of running event could I bring to Alberta or Canada that is a little bit different from the other events
Right.
that are around, to make it a bit of a draw. And I had heard from other runners that had done these timed running events down in the States
Yeah.
about these running events. And I thought to myself, I'll organize that, because there's no way I would ever want to run around a 400-meter track over and over, especially for 24 hours. But then the more research that I did into these timed running events to make my event successful, I found out how and why they're so popular is because they're so social.
Right.
And so, where typically, like, I'm a mid to the back of the packer.
Yeah.
So the athletes at the front, I'll see them at the very beginning as I walk past them to the back of the pack. At the very start, you're chuckling because
I know that all too well.
Yeah, I'll like walk by them and say, "I'll see you later. Have a great race. Keep some food for me." And or I'll make like, "Yeah, I'm going to the back of the pack where the party is." And but what's amazing about these timed running events and these short loops is that these faster athletes pass you. And as they're passing you or running even alongside you at times, or walking, they'll start talking to you. And it ends up being, you meet one another and you share some stories. It also can be very supportive. And the relationships that are built are just unexplainable, because you've got inevitably everybody's gonna suck or feel pain or hit a low point in these 24-hour races. Fast athletes, mid of the pack, back of the pack. And when those times hit, then the support happens, because where you might have been amazed at like how fast someone is going around the track, all of a sudden you're seeing them puking on the side of the track.
Yeah.
And then they're like wiping their face, and then they're like trudging beside you, and you say, "You've got this, now that you've emptied your guts." That's your reset. You say, little things that you found have been helpful to make you move forward. You're saying that to them, right? And then vice versa, you like hit a low point, and then all of a sudden, they're running by and they're like, "You got this, this, you're fine." And so that's the beauty of what I discovered with, and then the beauty of these events is those relationships.
Right. And I never would have realized, I've never had the opportunity yet to run on those events. Every time we've been trying to plan it, something's interfered with our schedule on that. So it's interesting to hear that aspect of it, because that's not how I would have seen it at all. I would have seen it as like running a track over and over again. But you're right about that. You're going to encounter opportunities to run with some of these athletes that you've never had a chance to run with.
And athletes that like we had a woman come from Ontario, and she set a 12-hour and 100-mile Canadian women's record, and you have the opportunity to be running alongside her.
Well, even some familiar names we know, like a Jay Kinsella or a Hero.
Yes.
That I can't keep up with them.
Yes.
Not even a little bit. Maybe a little bit.
But then you also get an opportunity to see what their strategy is.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that, oh my God, they do walk every once in a while too. Like they're
Absolutely.
not running the entire
from the
time.
best, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, and I think that's important, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about how people can become involved, either participating, volunteers, or even just by donation support on that, because I think that's a great event, and that's one that eventually I will get to. on my
Awesome.
own, either as a
Yes.
volunteer or a runner for sure.
I know the race calendar is so tight.
I know. I'm already looking ahead because I'm planning, at least 3 for the year. But one other thing we had talked about that I've been following interesting with your life is the consecutive run days streak that you have going. Today is, as we record this, I think 1,088 days in
That's
a row.
right. Yes.
Where does that come from?
So I was injured. What year was that? I think it was 2018. I had plantar fasciitis. So I had to change my training considerably. I did end up getting all my ultras done, but considerably slower than I'm used to competing at, because there was a lot more power hiking. And so at the end of that race season, I went to my coach, Jack Cook, and I said, okay, Jack, what do we do now? And he said, I want you to train by heart rate. And I was like, okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went home and went out for something like a 5K run. And it ended up that I was walking most of that 5K. And I was like, there's no way. Like, this is crazy. And so a few days later, I went into the store and I'm like, Jack, like, I'm walking most of the time. Like, there's hardly any running involved. And he's like, yep, just keep at it. And I would get so frustrated. So like, just how can my heart not be more efficient when I'm running all of these distances? And I would listen to podcasts actually with people that were following the heart rate method. And what I discovered and what kept me motivated to continue on with it was the stories that I would hear about. I think his name was Mark Allen. He was an Ironman who trained by heart rate. And of all those Ironman athletes who did really well, he's one of the exceptions who hasn't had shoulder surgery or hip surgery or knee surgery or any of those big surgeries that usually plagues those endurance athletes, because he did everything by heart rate. And
if I'm not mistaken, is he not one that broke a record at the Hawaii Ironman?
I think so.
As one of the oldest
Yeah.
competitors?
Yes.
So
yes.
the longevity of his career by that. And when we're talking heart rate, because I know exactly what you're talking about, because I've retooled my training on that too, is that they run at an aerobic heart rate,
Right.
which is the quick math is take the number 180 beats per minute minus your age, and that's where your heart rate has to be at. And it's frustrating. And I know
It is so frustrating.
I know stories of people that have dedicated up to 3 years of walking when they couldn't keep their heart rate low enough. But the transition was all of a sudden they were running at almost twice the rate with their heart being in that aerobic
exactly
level.
You explained it perfectly. Perfectly. And so I'm still at that. I do a lot of walking when I'm running still to get my heart rate down, but I recover so quickly. And so back to your original question, the reason I started the run streak was a friend of mine, Steve Baker. There was a store in Vancouver that was doing this contest 30 by 30. So
Right.
30 minutes of exercise for the 30 days of November. And I thought, you know what? Maybe I'll do this run streak for 30 days and it'll help with bringing my heart rate down. And so I did the 30 days, and there was a girlfriend of mine who did it with me, and it ended up that at the end I was like, I love that.
Yeah.
You want to do it for December? And she said, hell no. As long as she said, but then I'll keep doing it if it's not just running. And I
Right.
said, okay, well, I'm going to keep running. You do bike or you do yoga. And I actually started a Facebook page where it was a streak of exercise. So 30 minutes every day. So we had like one woman like counted her 30 minutes to the walking to the grocery store, getting our groceries, and walking home. There was another guy actually that walked a cow for his 30 minutes. It was really, really fun, but it petered out.
Right.
And but I just kept going. And then when COVID hit, it actually helped me mentally because with my business, with my 5 kids, like COVID, it just seemed everything was changing every day with restrictions. You can do this, you can't do this. And it felt like the 30 minutes was the only consistent thing that was unchanged in that COVID time. And and the other thing about my run streak too is that it's all outside.
Yeah.
And so I've ran in minus, I think, I can't even remember, minus 45. And I just, that kind of ties back to growing up on a farm.
Yeah.
And just the toughness of like, I grew up in a time or in a family where it didn't matter what it was like outside. The cows still needed to be fed. They still needed to be milked. Right. And so kind of the same thing. There's actually a run that I went out on and it was really cold and it had just snowed. The moon was still out. It was so early in the morning. And I was thinking, oh my God, it's just like going to get cows in the morning. And then all of a sudden I gave my head a shake and I'm like, we didn't get cows in the middle of in the winter. They were in the barn. Right. But no, I've always been an early riser. So that's when I usually run in the mornings.
Right.
And I do feel very connected to my roots, especially in those morning runs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couple other things I wanted to bring up here. You just got notified that you're getting an award.
Yes.
Can we talk about that?
It's still a little hard to believe.
It's the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal.
Yes. Yeah.
And why are you getting the award?
Someone nominated me, felt that I was giving back to our community in a great way. I'm still blown away.
Do you know who nominated you?
I
Did they tell
do.
you? Oh, okay.
I found out this weekend, actually. I went to a fundraiser last night, and it was my friend Elizabeth Checo.
Okay.
So my running buddy Dave's wife.
I was going to say, that sounds like a familiar name to me. Yes. So,
yeah.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. I'm still blown away. It's so fun. Yeah, I go to the run groups and I'm like, what am I going to wear? Like, I can't, I'm so used to wearing running tights and having my hair up in a ponytail or braids and a.
It said business attire, I think, on the invitation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. So I've got some ideas. There's been some talk about some makeovers.
Well, you know what? Congratulations on that. Well deserved.
Thank you.
And for sure, they weren't wrong to nominate you for that that award, especially when we're talking about with what you do for Survivorfest, the volunteer work you do. We've seen you at a lot of events as a volunteer. I think you were at the Berkey there last winter.
Yes,
Park Berkey.
that's right.
The Iron Horse, like driving 2 hours just to volunteer at a race is and you don't know how much that actually helps us. But at other races too, we've seen you at aid stations. So they really got it right with that one.
Oh, thanks so much.
One thing we haven't touched on yet, and it's just running takes up a lot of time because there's a lot of interesting facets to this running community, but your job in itself is one I've never heard of before. You're the task guru. And I said that too when you came out to volunteer this year at the Iron Horse. It's like whenever we needed a job done, you were the right person for the job. But that is your job, literally, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. So my motto is, if you have something to do, call Task Guru.
Right. And
so the majority of what I do is house cleaning, yard work. I've actually hired a few employees because it's been very, I want to say demanding, but in a good way. It's been amazing. The demand has increased. And so with the kids getting a little bit older, and them helping out around my own house a bit more, I've been able to build that up a little bit more. And I've got a few other moms who I was able to hire, and we love helping out other people. Like whether it's it's all the stuff that sometimes you have a hard time finding the time to do and do it well, right? And it's what I love is the messages. Like I'll get texts from customers. Oh, thank you so much for coming today. It felt great to walk into my home, and it was clean, right? Yeah. And so that is a wonderful feeling for me. My background is in social work, and I worked in some group homes for a while, and the school system, and I was asked to go back, but I've enjoyed my customers so much and helping them out that I just love this. I love task guruing, and it's funny. It's kind of like my dad as well, because he was as a farmer, you're an electrician, you're a plumber, you build fences, you do all kinds of stuff, and so again, it does feel like there's a tie back to my farming background for sure.
What's a task that you've taken on that really stands out as something you were maybe surprised that you took on, or found the most interesting?
Every once in a while, there's a woman that asks me to, she gets a load of wood dumped on her driveway. Yeah. And so we have to stack it in her back. Like it's a beautiful fireplace lounging area, right? And so we have to stack the wood in there, and then we have to stack it in her garage, and I think of my papa, and I'm always like, oh, I wonder if I'm like stacking it like properly so that it's a nice court, right? Yeah. And or cord of wood. Yeah. And but no, like, and there's some tasks that I don't do, like, and that's why I'm part of the Chamber of Commerce, so that I can refer tradespeople or people that are more qualified. For instance, we don't pick up dog poop. See Sam, our dog, is like, what? You don't pick up dog poop? But no, we had one customer who, after a few times, asked to pick up their dog poo, and I let them know that there was a professional dog cleaner, pooper cleaner for that. And so,
Laura, we're going to have to probably do this again sometime, because I think we've left some stuff out, but I do want to thank you so much again. Congratulations on the award nomination, actually receiving the award. That's the Queen Elizabeth Platinum Jubilee Medal. I do think people need to learn more about what you're passionate about there with the Survivorfest 24-hour run and what it supports. That's the Saffron
Sexual Assault Center.
Okay. And if they want to find out more information, is there a website or social media they can go to?
Yeah, they can follow me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm 80KLJ, or Survivorfest is good. And yeah, Survivorfest would be www.survivorfest24.com. And yeah, I mean, especially the last couple months with all the stories coming out of Hockey Canada, the Pope visit. I mean, almost every day you go in the newspaper and there's stories about kids and women and men being sexually assaulted. And so it's just, I know it's a difficult subject to talk about, but it's so important for us to educate ourselves, and so especially our younger generation are prevented from, anything bad happening.
And we'll make sure we share that in our social media notes as well there. So my guest once again, Laura Sherrer-Townsend, and you probably know this is coming too, because you've listened to quite a few of these, is you are here as someone completely interesting. So last question, if you were to recommend someone for this podcast, who would it be?
I've got to say Adam French.
Oh, yes.
He is so quiet, so humble, but the guy has great stories. Yeah. And he's got to talk about that farmer that said, go, Adam, go. Oh, that's my banker running down the road.
Yes, that's right. Oh, and yeah, Just the beard alone that he's
Oh my
groomed over the
God.
last 14 years that we've gotten to know him with the Iron Horse Ultra. So excellent choice. He has been on the list, so now maybe there's a little bit of a nudge to get going with that. So maybe we'll make sure we send him the link to this podcast so he knows about it.
For sure. Yes.
My guest once again, Laura Sherrer-Townsend, thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please make sure you give us a like and a subscribe. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider by searching Poulin Radio or Now for Someone Completely Interesting. Once again, my guest, Laura Sherrer-Townsend.